So Shabbat Shalom. My first thought on Thursday morning, as I watched rioters, white supremacists, Proud Boys, anarchists, anti-Semites, and seditionists storm the temple of democracy that is the US Capitol, my first thought was of Hanukkah. To the ancient Jews, this must have been what it was like when the Assyrian Greeks desecrated the biblical temple, turning over the altar, putting out the holy fire of the Ner Tamid, trashing the inner chambers and installing an idol to a Greek god where once stood the holy Ark of the Covenant. Outnumbered in the face of the mighty Greek army, fearing for their lives as the marauders raged against them. To be a Jew inside the temple would have been terrifying. And watching on TV, I thought, this is what it must have been like. I was horrified and I was saddened and sickened to see a hallowed sanctuary defiled by idolaters and zealots. And then a few days later, a day later maybe, watching the horrific replays on TV, I had a conflicting thought, a very uncomfortable thought. In the minds of the rioters who took control of the Capitol building, they were the Maccabees. They were patriots in their mind. Its current occupants, they were the usurpers. For those rioters, January 6th was Hanukkah. Not the beginning of a years-long battle, but if they had their way, the end of it. For the rioters, they were reclaiming their temple. Aggrieved by an election that they had been told was stolen from them, incited by a demagogic leader who told them that they were on a holy crusade, this throng of angry and enraged citizens feel the very core of their identity as Americans has been dismantled by progressives and coastal elites. They're brainwashed by conspiracy theories that are straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion playbook. And in their cult-like devotion to a man who promised to make their lives great again, their version of reality, these proud and dangerously misguided Americans, in their view, were not desecrating the temple of democracy. In their view, they were reclaiming it. We've seen this before. Zealots of any persuasion are still zealots, fanatics in uncompromising pursuit of their religious, political, or other ideals. And what is that old saying? One person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. I understand where they are coming from. It is wrong, it is demented, it is inexcusable, but it is not unprecedented or even unimaginable. I know a little something about America. We all know a little something about America because we have all long held it high as the beacon of democracy, the defender of freedom in the world. An example of the good revolutions, where good triumphs over evil. Lin-Manuel Miranda said it all to rap music. I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I was raised on stories of the Boston Tea Party and the American Revolution, and I'm well aware of its proud history of rugged individualism and its baked-in fear of government authority. The tribalism that is at the core of its social dynamic. The American exceptionalism that is both a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Hatov, a motivating impulse for evil and the source of incredible generosity. In America, since its inception, systemic racism has been used as a tool to defend American patriarchy, disenfranchising and ignoring the vital role that immigrants and African American descendants of slaves have played in making it into a golden Medina, a new Zion, that shining city of refuge that beckons your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, as Emma Lazarus's words proclaim at the base of the Statue of Liberty. Everybody has their own idea about what America should be, and often in America, that idea excludes some groups as much as it might strive to include others. To reference one more analogy, America is a melting pot, but from its beginning, few have agreed on the essential ingredients. And so my first reaction was, They are desecrating the temple. My second was to see it through their eyes, through the eyes of the rioters, and in their view, they were reclaiming the temple. My third take, which I share with you tonight, is that when politics becomes religion, religion itself is desecrated. What we saw on Tuesday was a desecration of American religion. The faith that the people placed in its founding documents was replaced by seditionists who placed their faith in a man. Both the man and his followers forgot or never really learned what was at the foundation of that faith, the Torah of America, its Constitution. This Shabbat, we begin the book of Exodus, the second book of the Torah of our people. It begins with the story of our 430-year sojourn in Egypt. The Jews went down to Egypt a proud and devout family, inheritors of the covenant of Abraham. They were guided by a fidelity to the one and only God. This was a belief system unique in all of the known world. It made them an anomaly to most, an enemy to some, and it made them also exceedingly successful in their endeavors. In Egypt, our ancestors cast off much of their Jewish identity. With no document, no tablets of commandments to learn and to study, they lost their mooring, they lost their way. The Midrash teaches us that when Joseph died, the Jews stopped practicing circumcision. They didn't follow the commandments and instead embraced a society that beheld Pharaoh as an all-powerful ruler. Material success and social status, that became their religion. The politics of staying in Pharaoh's favor became their purpose. They no longer prayed to God. They forgot God, and God withdrew. Now, for the first 400 years, when Pharaoh knew of their lineage and was indebted to their patriarch Joseph, the Hebrews' station in society was protected, even celebrated. Being in Pharaoh's protectorate served the Hebrews, the Jews, well, so well that they saw no need to return to their homeland, particularly long after the famine that led to their first exodus became ancient history and distant memory. The Jews of Egypt stopped telling their origin stories. They stopped talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of the sacrifice that was made to become a blessing and a light unto the nations. To use a baseball analogy, within a few generations, the ancient Hebrews believed that they were born on third base and thought they had hit a triple. In their retelling, God, through Joseph, didn't save them from a famine in their ancestral land. Egypt, Pharaoh, and their own exceptionalism, that is what saved them. But then, as we know, a new Pharaoh, who doesn't know Joseph, comes to power. And the Egypt he creates in one generation is, as described by Leon Cass in his new commentary on Exodus, that Egypt is built on xenophobia, ceaseless enforced labor, massive construction projects for Pharaoh's profit and edification, the hoarding of agricultural excess, various attempts to control and restrict fertility, including infanticide, and despotic rule. The Hebrews are enslaved, and now they find religion. Now they call out to God to save them, and a new leader rises up, Moses. He is more powerful than Pharaoh, and they want to make him their king. But Moses is different. You see, Moses is humble. He takes no credit for the miracles and the plagues that at first harden and ultimately break Pharaoh's heart. Every word he says in God's name. Moses is a messenger, a prophet, a shepherd, not a king, not a Pharaoh. He did not free the people from bondage, God did. And he redirects their affection and their adoration in service of a power greater than himself, greater than all of them. Because for Moses, this is not about him. It's about walking in the way of the Lord. The Torah is given weeks later at Mount Sinai, and the covenant that is established is the antithesis of Egypt. It's the antithesis of those rioters. The way of the Lord pointedly rejects those attitudes and practices. It will teach the humane treatment of strangers, weekly Sabbath rest, and 7 yearly sabbaticals for the land, A community-built sanctuary for worshiping God for all people, not just Moses, who delivered the people from bondage. Teachings against hoarding and excess, celebration of procreation in the service of the covenant, and the rule of law in the service of each and all. And what guarantees this covenant? It's not a man or a tribe or a hierarchy. Instead, an accessible text, Lo Bashamayim Hi, a text that is not in the heavens, the Torah. The Torah that every person assembled at Mount Sinai must agree to not only follow, but also to read and to learn and to study. Na'aseh v'nishma, the Israelites proclaim at the base of Mount Sinai, we will do it and we will study its meaning for generations. The temple of democracy was desecrated by people who forgot their American Torah. You don't attack the democratic institutions of your country to save democracy. You do so only if your end is to subvert democracy. Following the massacre of Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics, the UN General Assembly convened to discuss measures to prevent terrorism. And there was a furious debate over the nature of terrorism and the role of armed struggle and national liberation. During that UN debate on terrorism, a UN ambassador from Mauritania, Moulay El Hassan, I'm sure I'm butchering his name, argued, quoting here, all liberation movements are described as terrorists by those who have reduced them to slavery. The term terrorist can hardly be held to persons who were denied the most elementary human rights of dignity, freedom, and independence, and whose countries objected to foreign occupation, end quote. And as laudable as that sentiment is, critics countered that his argument was misleading because it failed to consider the issue in its entirety. What mattered, they said, was not the justness of the cause, something that would always be subject to debate, but rather what mattered was the legitimacy of the methods used to further that cause. The ends, they argued, could not be used to justify the means. You see, when politics becomes religion, the ends justify the means because all is being done in service of your cause, and your cause is your misguided belief that it is ordained by God. But if that cause tells you to terrorize innocent people, to tear down democratic institutions through violence and threats of violence, your methods invalidate your cause. Rather, the way of Torah, the way of Judaism, is that religion and its precepts of justice, equality, and the respect for human beings and human life, all being created in the image of God, they should guide your politics. Religion should guide your politics. When you are guided by these values, you don't desecrate temples or brutalize people. You guard them and protect them. In a free and democratic society, be it the United States, Canada, Israel, or anywhere else in the world, the safeguard against the eroding of fundamental rights and freedoms of that society is the study of those fundamental rights and freedoms, the reading and daily application of the Torah of democracy, our founding documents, our constitutions. Just like in Judaism, if we do not study, discuss, and grapple with Torah and grapple with Judaism in our lives, we will find ourselves in Egypt once again, far from home, far from God, with no idea how we got there and not a single clue on how to get back. We will confuse the sacred for the profane, tearing down our temples when our sacred calling is to build them up. America needs to study its Torah. Shabbat Shalom.